Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Translation Studies and Training, SOTST, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Translation Studies, Maths, English, First Year, MTT-010 Theories of Translation, Block-1 Translation, Concept and Importance, Unit-1 Translation, Concept and Paradigms. 1.0 Objectives. After reading this unit, you will be able to understand concept of translation, types of translation, different dimensions of translation. 1.1 Introduction. India has been a rich country because of rivers, vegetation. That's why many castes and creeds from all over the world have been coming here for the convenience of livelihood. These castes used to bring their own language and dialect. In their own language, they used to praise or condemn Indra, Varuna and Rudra. Plural Jana and Vivachan Janam are the words denoting residents of different districts speaking different languages. Every language has many forms, many idioms and proverbs. The difference between the language of one district and the language of another district goes away. There is a difference between the language of the east and the west of the same district. Shaka, Kushan, Hu and Austric peoples came here respectively. Jewish and Greek creeds have also been Indians. Prakrit language had also come into existence at the time of Patanjali. In the old place, the upper castes speak Sanskrit and the women are shown to speak Prakrit. This distinction has been shown by the distinction of education. In each language, the way of life of the people of the related geographical area and the speed of wandering thought are preserved. For emotional unity, it is necessary to maintain coordination between these forms and feelings of each field with the other field's forms and feelings. Translation is a powerful means of supplying the information needed to keep pace. Translation is a technique for enriching reading. Translation in various fields of writing connects us with writers, storytellers and poets of the country and abroad. It elevates us above discrimination by enriching our emotional wealth. A person becomes sensitive only by being free from discrimination. By invading Iran, Alexander obtained the gold-encrusted copies of Iranian Vedic literature Jind-Avesta and sent them from Greece. Greece is known to Iran for the richness of its knowledge and science. Greece and Europeans hid this very well. Rome defeated Greece, then all this Jind-Avesta received from Iran was translated into Jind-Avesta, and this translation was done by hundreds of translators in many years. Translations were also done in Rome. In this way, the effort of translation between the two languages was made possible by the pressure of necessity. The frequency of words in Sanskrit was prevalent. Interlingual translation was made, commentaries were written in Sanskrit. Patanjali, Saina, etc. explained the words of Vedas and Brahman texts through Tika texts, and in this way grammar texts were introduced. Charka Samhita is the oldest medical book. In this text, a complete introduction of Sankhya philosophy has been given. The oldest philosophy of the world is the Sankhya philosophy of Kapil. After Sankhya Darshana, books were written on Nyaya. Vaisheshik Darshana. At the time of Alexander, Aristotle stayed on the border of India for a few days. This philosophical tradition of Indian thought reached Europe with them, Indians. When the Arabs conquered Persia, they translated the ideological content of Indian texts into Arabic. Arab traders also played a role in ideological exchange. Translation was the medium of exchange between the languages of Arabia and Europe. Before this, Buddhism had reached Sinhala, China, Japan, etc. countries 2,500 years ago. These countries translated their texts into their own languages, and during the time of Ashoka, Buddhism progressed tremendously. The Buddhist texts of Pali and Prakrit were translated into the Arabic Persian languages, due to which many countries became followers of Buddhism. The Bible was composed after Buddhism. Translations of the Bible were done in the common languages of the world. Christianity has the largest number of followers in the world. After that, the followers of Buddhism are on the second number. The epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana were composed by Vyasa and Valmiki respectively in India. Translations of these two texts, or poetic texts influenced by them, were created in other languages of India. After this, the poetic scriptures originated. Rasa Siddhanta, Dhvani Siddhanta, Vakrokti Siddhanta, Alamkar Shastra, etc. Texts were translated into European languages in the world, and there was not much thought on poetic branches. Apart from serious literature, the emergence of entertaining folk tales also started in India. The stories of Panchtantra were firstly translated in Persia. Through translation, in the translation of poetry and story in European languages, the translations of Panchtantra were spread in European countries. After assimilation, the translator can reproduce. Creation and reproduction both require the same sensitivity. Kalidas' plays have been translated by every language speaker in India and the world. It is the glory of the translation that the world knows what a difference has come in the character of Rama and Sita in Uttaramcharitha from Valmiki Ramayana. Acharya Ramchandra Shukla published the translation of Cardinal Newman's literature in Saraswati magazine in 1904. Joseph Edison's Pleasures of Imagination, published in Nagari Pracharani magazine in 1905, was translated by Acharya Shukla under the name Kalpana Ka Anand. Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi had started encouraging Hindi writers for translation in 1905 while taking over as the editor of Saraswati. Before this, Max Muller also worked a lot in this direction for the development of translation. The translation was also encouraged by the Asiatic Society. 1 point to what is translation? Etymology of translation: origin, source language, target. Language: converting the content of one language into another while preserving the meaning and ideas contained in it is called translation. It is through this process of preservation that we can enjoy Shakespeare's plays today. It has been translated into almost all the languages of the world. The classical meaning of translation is translation in Hindi is bhashantar. One of the many meanings of anu is the meaning of followed. When a text is translated into another language, it takes the form of a translation. Translation word vad is derived from the root nu prefix and dhan pratyay, transil. Anu is suffix. Vad means to speak or say. The prefix anu is used in the sense of behind, after, following, etc. In this way, the translator's own. In ancient times, there was an oral tradition of education. Whatever the guru used to say, the disciple used to repeat it. This repetition was also called translation or anuvachan. Translation was also basically the same. Later, translation came to be called that section of the Vedas which could be repeated or read after listening to the Guru once. From Rigveda to Brahman texts, Upanishads and grammar texts, different use of anu prefix and vad para were made, which means the repetition of the word of the Guru by the disciple. Saying, statement used to support, restatement of method or canon, frequency is meaningful. Frequency, etc. Panini in Ashtadhyayi, according to Anupattamaya 21.15, has used the word anu in the sense of side by side, followed by, later i.e. near like. Anuratham is equal to behind the chariot. Anugangam is equal to bank of the Ganges. Anurupam is equal to similar. Anujatham after Jesht, in chronological order. In this way, in the context of translation, anu means a similar statement or a similar statement, according to the antecedents or the later. Universal practice has been considered translation. In our place, the script was invented later. The narration of Rigveda was first done by the sages. The statement was passed down from one generation to another through the Smriti tradition. But this memory-based tradition is only repeated. There was no scope for any reconstruction or translation in it. The process of repetition did not allow the verses of Rigveda to get distorted. And this priceless book of Sanskrit literature remained pure as it was. Apart from classical Sanskrit, the tradition of cosmic Sanskrit was also going on. That cosmic Sanskrit was spoken in many parts of Iran, Iraq, and Europe, etc. Latin Arabic, many languages like Persian, Turkish, etc. got mixed in this cosmic Sanskrit. In turn, cosmic Sanskrit influenced all those European and Iranian languages. Many words of their languages have been broken by philologists of Sanskrit origin. This process of mixing has been multi-ethnic and multilingual. Apart from this, the process of translation had also started in Greece and Rome. The Jinn Avesta which Alexander had taken after invading Iran was translated into Greek and Roman languages. The verses of the Zinda Avesta are almost the same as those found in the Atharvaveda. Gradually, the Greeks became familiar with Sanskrit literature only through translation. Rigveda was also translated into all the languages of Europe. When the British who claimed to civilize India read this translation, their eyes opened. If we see in this context, translation means converting the expressions and ideas contained in one language into another language to make it communicative. Neither we can take translation under pure science nor can we capture the true beauty of the original language of pure art only through the process of generalization. Generalization is to capture and soul the expressions of the object or person. When we feel the beauty of creation by catching it, then it is tasted and it is imbibed. When the composition or vad is imbibed, then it is followed in another language. To refer to it in another language is translation. The tradition of Gunvad and Gunanuvad in Sanskrit was linguistic only, like Purandar or Vritraha. Both of these words mean Indra on the basis of special adjective. 1.2.1 Origin of translation in ancient times. In Sanskrit literature, interlingual translations took place through commentaries. But when Bayar Khilji attacked the Nalanda University, the Buddhist scholars here carried their Buddhist texts from Bhutan, Tibet to China overnight. Buddhist scholars of China translated Buddhist literature into Dhini language by forming a team. Studying this team reveals the depth and seriousness with which Chinese scholars engaged in translation work. Such serious effort is important at the very beginning of the translation point. The translation was done by the team, used to be special in this team. His mother Jesus, principal translator, used to explain the language of texts written in Sanskrit or Prakritpati. Desi, meaning examiner, used to discuss the underlying meaning with the main translation. Chai Wan, text checker, listened carefully to the text of the chief translator and took care of its correctness, used to be a scholar of Sanskrit and used to listen to the lesson carefully and change the script of Sanskrit into Chinese language. Om PC Lat used to translate the words into Chinese. That one, the author of the text used to organize Chinese words into sentences and compose suitable sentences. Sani used to compare the texts and ensure the correctness of the translation. Khan, Sandikshak, used to remove unnecessary expressions and make the style. June Pan, reviewer, used to finalize all the decisions of the team. The above description reminds us that China adopted Buddhism. Therefore, at the very beginning of translation, he decided the process of how to make the translation satisfactory with a religious flavor. The word anuvad is used for translation in English. Trans means across in English. This word comes from Latin language. It is the job of a translator to transplant a work into another language or to make it transmittable through translation. The translator has to keep in mind that there should be no pressure on any father. Thus, Translation is a function in which form and content are reproduced in another language by scientific means. It is now being taught as a subject. But many thinkers abroad have expressed their views on this. Richard Brislin explained that translation refers to the conversion of ideas and thoughts from one language into another. But Th. Pori has shown its limits. According to Et Pori, conversion is considered to be very difficult from many points of view because the lexical synonym and ideological harmony of one language is not always a problem and parallel to the truth of another language. It is a difficult task to select the lexical synonyms given in the corpus. Because each word has its own equivalent in each language, and it is not necessary that its exact equivalent is available in other languages as well, the translator has to be alert for misleading analogies and analogies. If artificial words are used, the translation is destroyed. The source language is the source language and the target language is the language into which the translation is being done. There can be a difference in the technique of these two, so there is a possibility of interference and translation. The translator has to go beyond these barriers. Despite having different types of vocabularies, the ideology in which the translator's cultural background has been created can understand the meaning by being influenced by the same ideology. The translator must have the ability to go beyond his own thoughts and feelings. According to this capacity, it can understand the meaning of the original Kapan that in order to catch Bhadima, he has to go beyond his own profit and loss. Only then can he embody the author's mindset in the translation. Only after establishing identity with the expressions of the native language, he can explain the difference between his expressions and his expressions. If the translation deviates even slightly from reality, it will become artificial. For this, it is necessary to have mutual consistency in the context and expressions of both the source language and the target language. In his book titled Translation and Translation, Mr. When Poskeget added the dimension of honesty to be familiar with ideology, then he was also adding honesty to the writer from whose mind the ideology originated. Translation is done to meet the educational need. This is for information. Therefore, philanthropy automatically gets added to it. What is the intellectual level of the people for whom the translation is being done? How will they benefit from the translation? Word references have special significance. Evaluation method is adopted to check the authenticity of the translation. There are three main criteria of evaluation. 1. Back translation. 2. Field testing. 3. Determination of capability. 4. Evaluation of linguistic capability of base language and target language. First, by retranslating from target language to base language, it is seen that how far the translation has been successful and accurate. In the second field testing, it is tested by many readers to what extent they are able to grasp the text and facts of the original language through translation. Thirdly, by both the methods mentioned above, the capability of the translator is checked. Fourth, the translator should adopt the word closest to the original language. For this, words have to be selected from the target language by imbibing the expressions of the original language. Both Mrs. Lilare and Dr. Jagana Chakravarti have considered this problem. Both are of the opinion that translation is a translation of thoughts and feelings, therefore the use of the nearest words is expedient. Translation is not reconstruction, it is replication. Reconstruction is subjective and personal. Translation goes beyond individuality. Translation is about properly understanding the ideas contained in a language. That's why it is necessary to have an inner feeling in translation. This is possible only with their word arrangement, syntax, context, and meaning correctly. Translation is a means of interlingual communication. That's why the translator has to be psychologically close to the country and time of the original language. Only then he can approach them by turning his feelings along with the contemporary tradition, social ethics, economic political background, and cultural environment. This means that the translator is expected to have a good understanding of both the languages. Only after experiencing that closeness, both of them, one can taste nostalgia towards both the languages and cultures. This increases the naturalness. By this, he can make the translation completely communicable. Based on the above facts, the definition of translation can be determined. M.A. Celine has given definition considering translation as relation. Translation is the name of a relation that exists between two or more texts. These texts functions in the same position. The context of both the texts is the same and the message in them is also the same. R. Hartman and Stark have defined translation considering it as a process. The process or result of transferring content from one language or dialect to another. Rabindranath Srivastava and Krishna Kumar Goswami have written the definition in the book Translation Theory and Problems. Organizational transformation or creative reorganization of text material from one language, the target language, into another language, the target language, on the basis of the principle of equivalence is called translation. 1.3 Concept of translation. The word is divided into many geographical units. These geographical units have many linguistic forms. Each language has many dialects, many idioms and folktales and synonym words. In these linguistic forms, the lifestyle of the people of the concerned area, the pace of conduct and thought are preserved. Man's curiosity should be eternal, it is of emotional unity. Translation is a discipline that creates possibilities between linguistic regions. Sanskrit did not have the tradition of language transfer, rather, it had a tradition of qualitative translation. The tradition of translation in this layer is translation in Siddha literature since ancient times. Researchers on the widespread reception of the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore have pointed out that the Tagore's popularity is not due to the West's reaction of his work. His poetry has a suitable seating position in the superstructure of Orientalism created by the West. Translation is a kind of writing, whatever its purpose may be, it expresses a particular thought and emotion. Like historiography, criticism, editing, translation is also there which operates according to the trends of the era. There is a wide variation in the concepts of translation. Translation is not performed that evaluates the translated text in the context of the lost text if it is possible to try to remember that process. In this methodology, there is no place for evaluative instructional paradigms of traditional language-centric translation theory. Derrida has also attacked the traditional language-centric translation theory. Derrida believes that the basis of meaning is instability, and there is no such thing as word or structure. That's why pure ones are introduced within the same language or from one language to another. In such a situation, there should be talk of changing the concept of translation. The vision of translator changes form from one text to another, from one language to another. Derrida questions any definition of translation in which it is considered to be a conductor or a link to the meaning of the original.
It is believed that translation can be taken as an illustration in which language can be seen making changes in the original text. There was no tradition of interlanguage translation or translation proper as known. Presently in Sanskrit, there was a tradition of quality translation. It is from this tradition that the tradition of translation in Buddhist literature dates back to ancient times. Even in the global context, it has developed as a new discipline in the last few decades. Various trends in translation studies have developed in the 70s. After the 60s, some translation courses have been started in Indian universities. The publication of the Translation Quarterly magazine has started in the year 1961 AD. Research on translation and organization of seminars after 70s played an important role in developing translation studies in Hindi. In this direction, first Delhi University in North India and Kerala University in South started teaching translation course in Hindi. In the current era of communication revolution, Sources of knowledge have spread and it has become necessary to enrich knowledge from various sources. Internet is giving new direction. The medium of translation is changing. Language is taking on new colors. Sentences are getting shorter. The trend of Roman has increased. Internet is becoming a new medium of translation of signs, has created possibilities of socio-political mobilization. Due to the crossing boundaries of the nation-state, a deep disharmony arose in the field of communication. People's faith was shaken, but the Internet created possibilities by effectively interfering in this vulnerable situation. It has inspired a renewed exchange of ideas. Translation has an effective role in this. Translation exists in one form or another in all areas of language practice. Translation is a business of language. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU. 1.4 Types of Translation. There are the following types of translation. 1. Literary. 1. Prose translation. 2. Poetry translation. 2. Scientific and technical translation. 3. Machine translation. In the words of Ms. Leela Ray, President of the International Translation Committee, the best translators belong to those who, without falling into the translation of the word, identify their ability with the creative ability of the original author. For this, it is necessary that they do not fall into the temptation of modification of the original or the expression of their potential, and be familiar with value propositions and linguistic structure, etc. This is how it can make translation effective. Modern era's translation special methods have been told for translation: 1. Linguistic, 2. Semiotic, 3. Sociological. Nowadays literature has become equally scientific. Thus the first methods give first preference to verbatim line translation over natural payoff. The second step in literary translation is translation for literary sensibility. Efficiency is important in the translation of the path. This is not a literal translation but a literal translation, interpreting with the third plane. In this, translation is done by doing departure from the original. The emotions should be kept in ear when doing literary translation. A language is formed at the end of centuries. Therefore it has a historical background. The words of the language are valuable. There is internal power of language. The basis of his word is sense. Due to this, the value of the finiteness is in each word. Leela Ray has rightly cautioned that the translator should not fall into the temptation of modifying the original language or expressing his potential. 4 purposes of translation have been determined in the following way: 1. Practical or consequential. For this category, the translation must be accurate. Scientific or technical translation comes under this. Essays of Acharya Ramchandra Shukla come under this. 2. Aesthetic-focused translation requires sensitivity and care. The translation of Rabindranath Tagore's poems into Hindi by Suryakant Tripadathy is a perfect example of this. 3. Ethnicity-focused translation. It is necessary for ethnic unity and cultural completeness according to ethnography. In this, the knowledge of social behavior, belief and lifestyle, etc. of primitive castes and subcastes is accumulated and the data of development till now from every stage of civilization is preserved. This system is useful in relation to social and sociological subjects. 4. Linguistics-based translation gets familiar with value propositions and linguistic structure, etc. From these it can make translation effective. Translation done by computer comes under this category. 2 languages are used in translation, so interdisciplinarily is an essential element in it. In general, interdiscipline requires two-way interaction. Chomsky is a famous linguist. He has clarified the difference between linguistic ability and mental performance and has given importance to activity in both. Linguistic ability depends on the internal efficiency of the language and language competency is dependent on the consistency of words and proper syntax. In this, first of all, the process of translation is conscious. The translator first takes on the meaning and setting of the original language. There is a cultural distance between the author and the translator due to the time gap. These circumstances have changed since the time of the author. The quote of Suryakant Tripadathy Nirala, Jago fir ek baar, which is once again a poem of the time of the pre-independent India. The translator can pull it from that time and adapt it to his own time. Excellent intellectual ability is expected in this grafting. Chomsky has given two distinctions of interpretation. The first meaning is company equality and the second is its dependence on meaning. The ability of company is realistic, dependent on truth. Functional meaning is dependent on truth. Translation actually adjusts the meaning of the two languages. It does not have the facility of grafting to the translator. Nirala's Jago Fir Ek Baar poem will have to be translated in the same period. There will be a correlation between the pain of dependence and the necessity of Nirala. The real personality of Nirala will be identified from this translation. There are three classifications of levels of the process of translation recognized by Nida. The first undertaking of the original text is the author. The second undertaking is the meaning and configuration of the time. The third undertaking is the translator, who takes the meaning and configuration and changes it into another language. Adjustment of meaning, context and its consistency is necessary. In the translation of the poem, Himdi Tan Shring Se Prabuddha Shuddha Vaki Swayam Pravasa Munvana Swatantarata Pukati, by Prasad, the slightest deviation from the meaning of the poem destroys the poetic beauty. The transmissibility of beauty and the transmissibility of fear are essential. 1.5 Bases and limitations of interpretations. Words are the first step in the formation of language. Thereafter it is the condition of the sentence. Sentence itself is considered the smallest unit of language. The sentence itself clearly expresses a concept, idea or feeling. The limitation of translation starts from here. One of the reasons for the difference of languages is that the order of words in sentences is in different forms. Due to the practice of this sequence, the whole concept becomes unclear or provincial by slight reversal. Explanations are based on concepts and principles. Concepts are the product of the individual psyche and the particular individual also determines the sound signal for them. Like objects, concepts are also formed in a particular place or time and the words used for them become prevalent in the language of that place. In translation work, the translator has to face double mental pressure. First, he reads the sentence of the original language, following the words used in it, receives the meaning of that sentence and then expresses it through word order according to the sentence scheme of the target language. The limits of translation are linked to the two poles of symmetry and meaning. To quote an illustration in this context, a quote in the United Nations a few years ago caused considerable tension because it described the future collapse of Western Europe as a great tyranny. French, the word boutal, meaning worrying, was translated literally as English boutal, and their mutual tension subsided only when they were told that in idiomatic French the word meant something very similar to the English word serious. The two poles of analogy and meaning mean the process and production of translation work. The way to achieve these is that the translator communicates the meaning by intellectually analyzing the original language text. It is his analysis that makes the translation successful or unsuccessful. In this regard, the views of Dr. Indranath Chaudhary are worth noting. In fact, there is no specific formal semantic relationship between the verses expressed by the sentences of the speech. Every language has some context and reference. The context is kept in the surface structure of the language by connecting with the local and country time, and on the other hand, various historical references are present in the internal structure of the language influenced by the culture. The context is related to the figurative and figurative form of the language and the local country period associated with it, and the context is related to the deep cultural references contained in the language. That's why meaning is never lexical, it is contextual and referential. Observation, Nature of Translation Studies in the Context of Literary Translation, article, Translation Understanding, ed. Dr. Gandhi Gupta, 190. 1.6 Purpose of translation. Being a social animal, man has always been curious about distant creatures, other countries, other cultures. The aspiration to progress and move forward in him has always been strong. This curiosity and aspiration is very creative. Here we will refrain from discussing the subversive motives inherent in one country invading other countries to obtain or divert knowledge of their literature, politics or culture. The purpose of translation under creative purpose is the development of the physical and mental horizon of the individual. At a broad level, this development is linked to the evolution of the language and culture of the society and the country. We can easily translate their books, pamphlets and information by what measures the people of a country or a region made economic progress, how movements took place, how multi-level efforts and measures were taken for progress in education, how Voltaire's writings intensified the movement in France, how many atrocities Hitler perpetrated in Germany with the help of Nazism and what measures Russia adopted to establish the state of peasants and workers. This information is known in our country through the translation of the books there. It's only through the medium information is received from America, Europe etc. In English and through translation it is disseminated in Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil regions and Hindi-speaking regions. Translation, Vasudhaiva. Word, helps in fulfilling the vision of Kutumbakam, family. Translation has made the world a village in front of us, in which every person has full knowledge of other persons. House and family and conduct, by translation. The best objective is to increase the chances of emotional unity. Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali was translated with the aim of introducing the West to the philosophy and culture of the East. This purpose of translation earned Tagore the Nobel Prize. A good number of Nobel Prizes has been received by the authors of Asia and Africa because the texts were translated. 1.7 Basis of translation. The type of Sanskrit language used in the Vedas was necessary to be translated into classical Sanskrit to give it an all-India form because the words which were used in Vedic Sanskrit were no longer prevalent. Due to the obsolescence of words, their meaning and context could not be known. The problem before the scholars of that time was that on what basis Vedic Sanskrit should be translated into classical Sanskrit. In the midst of resolving this problem, grammar was born. Before then, Panini in his Ashtadhyayi treatise fixed the meaning by understanding the context on the basis of the metal form of the words. In determining the meaning of taking the basis of Yatu form or made the etymological meaning of the word as the basis. Yasak has chosen the same etymological meaning in his Nirukta, with a slight manipulation. The Mimsakas have considered the arguments of culture as 8 grounds, such as sati. It is difficult to translate it into English. Bhartrihrin invalidated the possibility of understanding the meaning of words through root form. In a particular context, the meaning of the word is derived from the order in which the words are kept in the same order. In the order of the origin of the universe in the Vedas, a new linguistic science was created regarding Pashanti, Madhyama and Bakari. In fact, because of being a philosophy, it should be called language philosophy. Bhartrihari said that the word is the manifestation of Brahman. This philosophical sounding word is close to the theological principle that the origin of creation was an explosion. As there are many stages of an explosion, similarly the expression of the word immortal is in 3 stages. The first stage of manifestation is Pashanti. In Pashanti there is a spark of ignorance. The statue is the inspiration of this insight. In this first phase, there is no mix between words and objects. Words and thoughts are inseparable. In the words of Tulsidas, the meaning of Gira is said to be in the middle of the water. Different words and whither are equal to the points rising from the water and waves. In this integral state, cosmic reality is perceived as a shining, calm flow of consciousness. Poet Nirala, according to his Vedank, in his poem, Kontam Ke Par Ne Kaha, has presented such a peaceful flow of consciousness by writing, Akhil Jal Jalda in one episode. The second stage is that of Madhyama. In this, there is a pre-language condition in which all the linguistic elements of the sentence are present in an unmanifested form like a tree in a seed. Due to this, the importance of finding the seed words of poets had increased. Bagari language is the last stage of the East in which words take the form of language. The linguistic elements of the unmanifest seed become expressed and take the name of the language. Sumitranandan Pant has presented the development of Pashanti Madhyamya and Baitri powers respectively in his poem, Pratham Rashmika Ana Ranjani Tune Kase Pahna Kaha Kaha Se Balpaya Tune Ye Gana. By this episode, expressed Hui Tu Gakar Naam Roop Nana, Pant ji has drawn a map of the development of the universe through its characteristics without naming Pashanti Madhyama and Vakari. Bhartrihari has depicted the development of language through these three stages. Looking deeply into this development of language, the internal structure has been considered universal. In this universal form, all the characteristics of a particular language are present. It is from the universal structure that special languages, influenced by their respective times and countries, emerge. This language becomes the basis of special communication. Translation, public perception and significance. This base script is made up of two subcomponents, namely the sequence of rescriptable corpora and the dictionary. In English, Chomsky has written rewriting rules for these rewriting rules. It is a structure to put words in the right place. In fact, it is a law of perception which is related to the self as well as the subject matter. As these three words are, it comes, and only these three words are in a gap, then the speaker knows that some set of these three words belongs to this language, such as, he comes or, it comes and, he goes. Or, he does not know this language. The first part of the base is the sum of this sequence. The second subcomponent of the base plate is the lexicographic. By this lexical component, the syntactic, semantic and autonomic properties of the subject matter are determined. With the help of these two components, the surface structure reproduces the deep structure. As a result of this reproduction, their transformation into element structure takes time. The specialty of Chomsky is to consider this process of reaching the surface structure as universal without associating it with any one language. Thus it becomes clear that Chomsky has set standards with dual activities. These procedural steps from base to song structure and deep to flow structure have proved to be important in creating the methodology of translation. Neither, a translation expert in America, developed a technique based on these bases of Chomsky's which proved useful for translation. On the one hand, this technique decodes the source language, on the other hand, provides a vision for the translator to correctly understand the process of proper reproduction of its equivalent expression in the target language. Neither's fundamental contribution is that he has left the surface before Chomsky. He has taken its last two surfaces for the basis of translation theory. Neither in his translation methodology considered the first step structurally transforming the source language text into the seed text closest in meaning. The second step is to transfer the meaning of the source language to the general structural level of the target language. The third step is to reproduce the semantic and stylistic expression of the original language in the target language. In this way neither moves from the root structure of the source text to the deep structure, and then transfers the deep structure of the dead text to the deep structure of the target language. In this way, from the structure of the mind, he reproduces it by coming into the actual structure of the target language. Neither has taken an opportunity of realizing the principle of generalization explained by the literary critics in the period of translation. Neither said, empathy of spirit transfers the deep structure of the source language to the deep structure of the target language by means of empathy. If a word does not come in a specific cadre, then the word found in that can be transferred in its place. If the word lamb is not found in the Eskimo caste, then the word seal of the Eskimos can be used instead of it. 1st July 2001 Base of translation, source language. Neither preferred dynamic equivalence. Formal equivalence. The upper formal equivalence is in the lower order. In dynamic equivalence, expression is given. In 1910, Sri R. Raghunath Rai, in the book, The Art of Translation, considered this sense-based integration to be the best. Sri Aurobindo also considered translation as a reconstruction, not the reproduction of the word, in which equivalent images and emotional beauty are recreated. Generative grammar equivalence and universality in the West by the 60s of the 20th century. According to the systematic, grammar, the principles of translation were created. German universities classified translation as a science. The experts here, Professor Otto Code, etc., presented the concept of structural equivalence by looking at the equivalent of the word or the whole text as a unit around equivalence. The poets of Germany were emphasizing on inner wisdom. The standard of this intuition had an impact on the concept of translation.
Many scholars agreed that translation is a science, but in order to reach the soul of the language lesson, intuition was mixed. It has a combination of hermeneutics and breeder elements, which believe in developing the science of translation by coming from deep above and penetrating into the bottom structure while translating two languages. Wiles has also accepted the principle of universality and said that translation is possible due to two basic factors. This is due to the collective difference of human experience, 2. Understanding language. Reason for the common similarity lies in the syntactic structure of the languages and its original word. Later, in countries like Belgium, Israel, Netherlands, etc., instead of focusing on the original language, they focused on the acquisition of past text in the target language and its context. Its importance in the field of literature was displayed with a special arrow. This is the operating principle. 1.8 Operations. The student of literature is well acquainted with the operation. Historians and critics have interpreted history and literature with the help of this migration. Adopting the physical system, Hindi critic Ramvilas Sharma told that power is going from outside to inside. Therefore it is energy, which is energy, not consciousness. The ideological basis of the operation is very old. This type of operation has been done in literature considering the nature of the contemporary era of the poet and the nature of the critic's own era. But Theo Haumans focused on this manipulation in the field of translation in his 1985 book The Manipulation of Literature, a study in the field of literary translation. After this more attention was given and most of the books were written, as it is clear from the above examples that circulation of money is done with some purpose. Dr. Ramchandra Shukla gave his opinion about Akbar to get rid of the charge of cruelty, or wrote about Aurangzeb that he used to compose Hindi poetry himself and used to invite Hindi poets in the court. Theo Hermes took notice of the purpose, and André Lefebvre developed this further by saying that translation is a kind of rewriting and it expresses a particular ideology and poetics for a particular purpose. The nature of rewriting also becomes clear when the ideological basis of rewriting is clarified. 1.9 Dimensions of translation. The dimensions of life have increased according to the need of human being. Accordingly, the dimensions of translation have flown away. These dimensions can be divided into the following subdivisions. 1st September 2001 Translation and Religious Literature. The various translations of texts first appeared in the translation of religious literature centuries ago. Commentaries of the Vedas and literal translations. Interlingual translations of Vedic literature were done in Tibetan, Singhali, Bhutani, Japanese languages. The translations of the Bible were first done by the preachers of Christianity in the Oriental languages, but later all the translations were done in the Pali, Asian languages. These were taken in the religious literature because in ancient times they were translated from the point of view of religious propaganda. From the point of view of spreading knowledge, translation touched many dimensions in the 18th century. 1st September 2002 Translation and Knowledge Texts. Enlightenment of Europe in the 16th century pushed the religion behind and gave importance to the dimensions of science. The Bible was studied from the point of view of science, and the theory of the origin of the creation described in it was rejected. After that, The discovery of scientists like Galileo, Newton, etc. created panic among the officials of the religious scriptures and the state administrators. This was the time when the knowledge of Europe spread all around and the thoughts of those scientists were disseminated in the world through translation. Other countries also started exploring science in their own literature. Raja Ram Mohan Roy discovered scientific dimensions in the Vedas freed from divine reasons, freed the superstitions prevalent in the Indian psyche by taking the basis of logic and discretion. Focusing on social evils, especially Sati Pratha, Swami Dayanand spread the education of Shudras and women with the help of Vedas. Ram Mohan Roy translated ideological literature. In 1974 AD, the first Asiatic Society was established in Calcutta and it translated Indian literature into English. But this translation work increased Indian pride and self-respect. After the establishment of the Fort William College, attention was paid to making English literature and French etc. foreign literature available in Hindi. This also gave a base to colonialism, but their purpose was not successful. Translations of foreign literature by Fort William College created a sense of competition in the Indian mind. Like translation-based transfer Vedanta and Bible, comparison was made between Vedanta and Bible, Kalidas and Shakespeare and Bhadbhuti etc. All these knowledgeable literature became familiar through translations. The specialty of Raja Ram Mohan Roy was that he created his own standards by taking the positive elements of English literature. He took the basic elements of Christianity. His translations of Indian literature played an important role in the formation of the Indian mind. Within the dimension of translation is the type of illumination of the Renaissance. Vedas were translated into many languages like H. Wilson and R.K. H. Griffith translated into English and Frederick Rosen translated into Latin. J. Stevenson translated Samaveda into English. Th. Griffith translated the Yajurveda into English. Keith translated the Northern Code into English. Lutsching and H. Oldenburg and translated into French. Martin Hum translated the Aitreya Brahmana into Jadriji and Koch translated the Shilpaya Brahmana into English. Apart from German, Shenya, English etc., Sanskrit texts were also translated into Asian languages like Chinese, Persian etc. Hegel's riddle of the universe played an important role in sowing the seeds of revolution in Russia. This is why Lenin praised this book. This book was translated into the languages of Europe and Russia, which was translated into Hindi by Acharya Ramchandra Shuks. Along with this, while translating it, Darwin's evolutionism was focused with a long note for Hindi speakers, due to which their cognitive dimension developed. 1st September 2003 Translation and Scientific Technological Development. In today's scientific era, the dimensions of translation have evolved creatively as each country engages in further research using all the discoveries made in other countries. Government organizations and private organizations both take advantage of these loans and decide further development. In the Charak Samhita, the technique of medicine, the names of trees, plants and medicines and the old Indian way of identifying diseases are preserved. Many translations of Charaka Samhita were done by government organizations and pharmaceutical companies in European countries along with Asian countries like China, Japan etc. In medicine, Sushruta is called the Adi Acharya, the earliest expert of surgery. It was through the translation of Sushruta Samhita that the world got to know which methods and medicines are appropriate to be used during operation, and the possibilities of advanced development were explored in this field. In meditation, The victorious countries make treaty on the condition of handing over their scientific sheep and other literature to the conquered country. They used to get these texts translated into their own language. In modern times, movement has become free. Every country is ready to share its achievement with others. In the field of astrology, this has been proved through the translation of Aryabhatta, the famous astrologer who calculates the movements of the constellations. Even today, the research done in other countries including India is obtained through translation for the information of research and talk. In the development of chemistry, the technique of using metals like gold available in the Vedas was translated into other languages of India and then it reached China and Japan via Arab countries. Atharva Veda describes the names and methods of many medicines, which were translated into other languages and are being used to cure incurable diseases like cancer. India was most prosperous in the field of medicine and mathematics. For many days there was a debate as to how many inventions of zero and decimal number were made, but the result of all the searches came out that it was the gift of India. The Arabs got this decimal system from India through translation. Similarly, Asia also got the technology of making paper and making gunpowder only through the translation of their literature. Countries influenced by the Enlightenment such as France, Germany, Yugoslavia and Italy showed interest in developing the dimensions of science and technology. All of these had a major role in the development of capitalist forces. An invention made in one country immediately reaches another country through translation. Technology and scientific dimensions increase the dimensions of translation. Even today, the smallest discovery, invention and translation available in the field of space science make the entire world available. Each country writes its principles and achievements in its own language. An important dimension of translation is also that utmost liberality has been shown in the life of technical words of another language. This generosity in English has been there from the beginning. The derivation of the word allo is believed to be a combination of Greek, atos, other, and Spain. In English, Greek, Latin, French, Arabic, Persian words have been accepted in the medical dictionary. Many words of all these languages were also adopted. Even today, we use many words either in the original form or according to the nature of Hindi language, we take its modified form. Academy is a modified form of academy. Station, railway and other such words have also been kept intact. Just as the process of exchange has been going on in the formation of civilization and culture, in the same way this process has been going on in the language as well. In the dimensions of translation, this ease and simplicity have been experienced by the process. In the above illustration, the similarity of Sanskrit letters and meaning can be seen in the Greek language. Today, if we look at the comparative situation of developed country and developing country, we can see the developed country without any research or assistance. We cannot be successful in invention. Developed countries are developed only because of their developed technology. It is only through translation that we can adopt their technology. Multinational companies also hire translators for technology translation. 1st September 2004, Translation and Trade. The dimensions of translation include the advancement of business. Indian-made silk was found in Egyptian mummy. Arab traders had brought silk clothes from India to Europe. Knowledge of languages of many countries is essential for doing business. These languages are known through translation. Handicraft industries flourished during the Mughal period. They were exported to other countries only when their language was translated into the languages of those countries and their language was translated into their own language. The East India Company took advantage of translations for the growth of trade. Today's multinational companies carry forward negotiations by translating them into the languages of their respective countries in order to sell their goods. His advertisements are translated into many languages. 1st September 2005 Translation and Advertising. Many languages are prevalent in India. Multinational companies have to get translation done in Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam along with Hindi. To increase the number of customers, the dimensions of translation have been simplified and expanded. To make its programs accessible to all, the government gets them translated and published in many languages. Hospitals, educational institutions, management training, etc. take the help of translation in advertisements to make them popular. The dissemination of information based on how cancer is being treated at the institute or how brain tumor is operated at has increased the dimensions of translation. Science gets translated. 1st September 2006 Translation and Media. Radio, television and newspapers come under the medium of communication. Today, radio broadcasts and newspapers have reached every village. Video broadcasts also made time by current wave. They have broken the boundaries in front of them. The complete books, pamphlets and CDs are available in the entire world through translation. Radio broadcasts news in almost all the languages prevalent in India. Apart from this, the news of the world is also broadcast on air. The material received in regional languages is disseminated after translating it into Hindi and other languages. The information received by the New Yorker is translated into Hindi. Reuters is the international agency from where translation of all languages is provided. Television is also computer-based. Nowadays there are many copies. Any person or organization can give any kind of news or advertisement by making it their own. The four of other countries are broadcast through translation and in Hindi Urdu. Interviews are taken from social and cultural workers. They are translated and broadcast. Films have given life to the dimension of translation. Many excellent films have been made in Indian languages. Through translation we get them in Hindi. The advent of translation has increased the dimension of human entertainment. Translation has brought about the information revolution. 1st September 2007 Translation and Tourism Industry. Today's travel agencies have published attractive booklets with information and pictures of tourist places in the country and abroad. These pictures are also published in the newspapers along with the description. These agents also give many types of discounts. India is very rich in terms of tourism. Kochi and Kerala are known from Kashi as much as there are tourists coming to Kashi from south. At such a time, the demand for translation and translator goes away. Kerala tourist guides have to translate in Hindi and Hindi guides have to master translation in Tamil Malayalam. There is a sense of competition among the guides. Indian tourists going abroad need such a translation which is also aware of Indian languages like Japanese, etc. In this way, development is also taking place in terms of earning money in the dimensions of translation. 1st September 2008 Translation and the Judiciary. Allah required translators to translate the medieval Persian claim into Hindi or English. Members of the Supreme Court come from each state. Their documents are in their regional language. They have to get it translated. It still works even in the measures. In Hindi-speaking states, arguments are usually conducted in Hindi, but if a non-Hindi speaking person is appointed in the High Court, then it has to be conducted in other language. In such a situation, The client needs an instant translator. All document translations have to be provided in English. There are many types of license obtained in the jurisdiction of the court. 1st September 2009 Translation and Cultural Relations. The countries that are friendly with other countries take the medium of translation to understand the culture and literature, etc. of those countries. Speaking after observing 2 or 4 sentences, it becomes established as soon as it comes, but it does not give a complete introduction to its literature and culture. As the President of America welcomed the Prime Minister of India, saying, "You are welcome." It is just a way to strengthen cultural ties. Its sequel is the promotion of our literary culture by being aware of the introduction of literature and culture. Nowadays, Cultural Relations Council is established in every country for this purpose. Under this in India, they have to be made aware of the culture of other countries. All this introductory exchange takes place through translation. Delegations take translators with them when visiting other countries. The need to enhance cultural connection has transformed translation into a productive artistic science. The development of all the above translational dimensions means the strengthening of world friendship. 1.10 Let us sum up. Translation is not only a linguistic transfer between two languages, but also a medium of communication between them. Translation is not only the difference of information or facts but also the exchange of those languages between cultures. The birth of translation can be considered due to the necessity of dialogue, but today the nature and field of translation has changed in this country of Gyan Prasad. Its role has also changed. Today it is inevitable. To use the words of Susan Bassnett, it has become the fundamental act of human ideological exchange. The purpose of translation varies. It is also used to fulfill its vested interest. The dimensions of translation are many levels. Work related to all walks of life is expanding into the translation business. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.